the world like out into the light, as it were, or bringing the storytelling out into the light, there's like the little winks and nods that you get as you enter this world, right?
Mm-hmm.
We first see who John is by way of a flashback. Not so much a flashback, but a speech of an impossible task.
Yeah.
And that is when the head honcho of this particular family is explaining to his son who John Wick is.
Yeah.
And why he's so dangerous, and why what you've done isn't just stealing somebody's car. This isn't just anybody's car that you took. And then he says, who he is, what he's done, why he's so famous, why he's so notorious. And then as that voiceover comes across, John is in his basement and he's beating up the concrete to get to the safe that he has, that he's cemented in the floor. And it's the gold coins, it's the guns, it's pretty much, the sequential, like, burying, I'm digging up, I buried a part of myself. Now I have to reach back and become who I was, or who I was supposed to be.
Yep.
Which for the audience is like, okay, that can be taken as many symbolic, symbolism, happening there. And then before you know it, he's just rusty enough, but still capable enough to get the job done. But it's not without getting hit. It's not without getting cut. And then, of course, the one thing that they did very beautifully in the first one that they seem to have lost, in my opinion, through 2, 3, 4, and even in Ballerina, which was the first one seemed very early days, like there's another world beneath our world. Mm-hmm. And neither one of them are aware of one another. But it's quiet and subtle enough that it could be very actionable, right? Yeah. People forget Willem Dafoe was in the first one.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like I said, it's early days John Wick. So that he knows who John is. That they have history together. That they're aware of one another.
Yep.
But he's not above, to your point, of serving the higher table, or the bounty that may be on John for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And then you have other pieces that never really kind of come back. You never have the cleanup crew that came back in the first one.
Yeah.
Remember when they came to his house, you know, and then he gave them the coins, they wrap everybody up and then they leave. You never really see that again, which is kind of interesting, but that's also with storytelling. It's enough there for the audience to understand, I get it.
Yeah.
How is he going to cover all this up? Well, there's a crew that comes in and cleans it.
Exactly.
Get it. But one thing that happened in the first John Wick that never gets brought back up, and it's never touched on ever again, is that there's small fragments of the real world that do know who this world is. Like when the cop comes to his door, Jimmy, when he comes to his door and he says, "Are you working again?" And he says, "No, I'm just sorting some things out." He's like, "All right, well, I'll leave you to it then." And then he just leaves.
Yeah, I love that subtlety.
Yeah, but it never comes back.
No, there's never, the two worlds never really intertwine after that point. They want to kind of set it out there that there are some subtleties to these different worlds playing in the same universe. And I mean universe, like the physical structure of the world, like they exist there. There's, the real life world and the underworld. And of course, any people that would know others from the underworld, any people that exist in the real world that know these potentially seedy characters in the underworld are law enforcement. As like you said, Jimmy's an ex-cop. I think Willem Dafoe was a cop or something like that.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, where it's very fascinating to see. It's not so far above the real world. Like when you get to John Wick 3 and 4, I mean, you're already so far above.
You're immersed into that real world. The first one does both, as you're saying.
It does, and I think that was probably for the best, because it allowed everybody in to see, okay, I get it. This is a whole other world. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When you say that he's going through purgatory and through the levels of hell, aside from the smoke and mirrors that I just talked about, how does that waver for John Wick 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah. So to kind of go back to that original scene in the third one where Ernest, it's by the way, it's just funny that there'd be like a 7'3" assassin dude walking around. His name's Ernie.
It's kind of out there.
Doesn't it just make you laugh when he's just looking up and it goes Ernest? And
Yeah.
like, his name's Ernest and he's a badass assassin. Like, this is, nice touch. And as you're saying, he's walking around the corner and what's he reading? He's reading the Divine Comedy from, Dante Alighieri, and a pretty amazing passage from that. But that book is separated out into 3 different stories within that. You have Inferno, you have Purgatorio, and then you have Paradiso, Purgatory, Paradise. It's sort of Dante's own interpretation of the soul's journey through the afterlife in order to find salvation, sort of thing. It's kind of like the main, it's another thick book. We like talking about like really books that kind of just grab you.
Real dense for sure.
Very dense. And it's a one that's like, you need to read it a bunch of times. We talked about Marcus Aurelius Meditations before in the past. Like, these books are meant to be really thick, like lead bricks, because like there's so much in there. And I love that book. And it's, but as that's not just a subtle thing. Like that caught my eye, that scene. I was just like, why would they kind of put that in here of all places? Like at the beginning of the third one. And I was just kind of not trying to force a square peg in a round hole, but it's like, why would they introduce this particular passage at this point in the story now? And I kind of got looking into it. And I was thinking that after the first movie, you could almost, not like word for word or like 1-for-1 ratios or anything like that. It takes a little bit of extrapolation and thought, to maybe comport yourself there. But it kind of reminds me of John as Dante going through different levels of hell in order to find salvation, which, as we all know, is what ends up in the end of the fourth movie, is that he ascends to heaven. And during each one of the second, third, and fourth movies is sort of allegorical to Dante's journey through the underworld, where he's fighting through hell. He has his trusty guides with him throughout the journey. He's got the poet Virgil. He's got who are the other ones? Beatrice, and then I think there was a saint of all things. I think it's Saint Bernard, I think is his name, in the third book. And these are all guides that kind of navigate him through this underworld and these journeys, sort of his concierge kind of thing, and his consigliere kind of thing, and I'm just thinking, like, that's also characters, like, who's John's main, after the first movie, who's John's main, like, what would you say, friend and advisor? It's Winston of the Continental. They have that good kind of kinship camaraderie starting in movie 2. And I was just kind of thinking, holy shit, like maybe this is like a mere representation of John going through hell and then purgatory. Hell in the second one, because he's literally in the catacombs of ancient Rome fighting, fighting the bad families and, on the assassination attempt that he's got. And there's the purgatory, which I think kind of represents maybe a little bit of the third movie, because he's sort of cast himself away from New York. He's on the lifeboat. He exits himself to Africa, to Morocco. And that's almost symbolic of him finding his way to some far off land that he needs to cleanse his sins, which is exactly what Dante does in Purgatory. He basically, once they navigate through the depths of hell and inferno, they find himself in Purgatory, which is basically an island on the other side of the world. It's kind of like they just went through the underworld, like they went through the depths of the earth, through hell, and they came out the other side, and now they find himself in Purgatory. Same thing, kind of John. He finds himself alone in some faraway land by himself, trying to figure out, how can I find salvation here? And then kind of coincides with the last one of him, as I said, the ascension on the steps of Sacré-Cœur in Paris, where he finally finds salvation and the afterlife, where he ascends to heaven. which we assume, because, does he pay for his sins? Does he, I don't know. It's up to interpretation at that point.